I'm going to hit record now. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and so everybody knows that today we are going to be talking about sea turtles and how sea turtles are really awesome. And so I have, hold on just a second because I can't see everybody when I do that. So let me hit share my screen.
JC, did you have a question real quick?
We saw a deer last night in our yard.
Oh, lovely.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right, you all can't see my notes, right?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right, so we are going to be talking about sea turtles, and if you can see me in the picture, I have a sea turtle on, and so we're going to ask you to use the annotate up on top of your screen. You should see a button. Remember, we've used the annotate in the past. If you can't find the annotate button, if you want to write it in the chat button, that's okay too. And Carter, if you can just keep track of that. With the annotate, I want to see if you can't write, so there's a text button. You can text, what is the difference between a sea turtle and a tortoise? Okay, so I want you to write, and it could be just one word, and then you can write something else. But if you know one of the differences between a sea turtle and a tortoise, and then the other thing is what is the same, what do you think is the same with a sea turtle and a tortoise? So if you want to use that annotate and just write it, or if you don't want to write, you can just take your microphone off and say it if you'd like. Does everybody remember how to get to the annotate? Okay. So what is a difference between a sea turtle and a tortoise? Good. I see one of the things that's the same, that they're reptiles. Anybody know anything, like if you look at them, what looks the same? What looks different? And some of the other classes that you've been to before, think about their habitats. Or remember we talked about, Miss Carter talked about habitats where they might live, or how they also have differences in what they things that look the same and things that may have been adapted to be different. Okay, so one of the differences is land versus water. One lives in the ocean, but the tortoises don't, but they're in the same family. Yep, they're in reptiles. How about a visual? Yes, JC and Lena.
The sea turtle and turtle. The turtle has feet, and the sea turtle has fins.
That's right. That's right. They have flippers. Yep, they're a little different than fins, but yep, flippers. Yep. And then Lena, you had your hand up too?
Mine was going to be the same answer as
Okay.
Casey's.
Well, tell me something that they look like they have the same. What is on their back?
They both have shells in their underside.
They both have shells. That's right. All right. So we're going to go, I'm going to show you the next screen. Okay. So I'm going to turn the.
They lay eggs.
What was that?
They lay eggs.
They lay eggs. Very good. So I'm going to clear all the drawings and we'll go to the next slide. Absolutely. Oh, wait a minute. Let me clear all the drawings again. Okay. All right. So we're going to go to the next slide. So you got a lot of them. Sea turtles, they live in water, whereas tortoises, they live on land. What they eat is different. Sea turtles, they eat a lot of times jellyfish and algae. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Whereas tortoises, they eat grass. And you guys got this one, sea turtles, they have flippers but tortoises, they have feet, so they have flat feet. And then there's a lot of other things that are very similar, that they're same. They are reptiles, they have 4 legs, they both have heads and tails, they both have shells, and they lay eggs, and you all got those as well, so that's awesome. But they are a little bit different. And there are 7 sea turtles in the world, the different types of sea turtles. One is called the olive ridley sea turtle. It's small. Then we have the loggerhead sea turtle, the leatherback, which JC knew about that one, the hawksbill sea turtle, the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle, the green sea turtle, and then the flatback sea turtle. And so oftentimes when they're given names, sometimes it's named after people, but sometimes it's named after a attribute or something that it looks like. So what do you think, why do you think they call it the leatherback? Why do you think that one's called the leatherback?
It's
Lena.
like
Oh, Devesh.
it feels like leather.
It feels like leather, but it also looks like it. It looks very different than the other types of sea turtles. Yes, Lena.
It's gray.
It's gray. Yep. And so,
Leather is the color of kind of like gray.
yep. And then the hawksbill, that's named because its mouth kind of resembles a bill like a hawk. And we're going to talk about a little bit of the different mouths that they have. So sometimes the names are given by attributes of what it looks like. But we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of a sea turtle. And they have a shell, and it's basically for protection. One of the other differences that we didn't talk about is a tortoise can actually pull its head and its legs up into its shell. A sea turtle cannot. The shell is a natural suit of armor. It protects the turtles from predators. It can't draw its arms and legs up in its shell, but their skin is very scaly and it is tough. So it gives them some defense that way. It also has a mouth and a beak. So it doesn't have teeth, but some sea turtles, they have like round beak that have these serrated edges. So it's kind of like, they're kind of like teeth, but they're serrated edges of their bill, of their mouth part. And so that is used to cut and to tear into food. And also like the sea turtles, they can't drink seawater, they can drink seawater, but they have a pair of glands that are near their eyes, and that removes all the salt. So they can drink the water and then they cry out the salt. So sometimes those glands kind of look like sometimes the sea turtle is actually appearing to be crying, but it's just extracting the salt from the water so it can still drink while it's in the seawater. They also have flippers. And so over millions of years, their 4 legs of the sea turtle, they have changed from being legs to being flippers, and they're kind of like blades through the water. So that helps them fly through the water, and they can swim really fast, up to 15 miles per hour. And the back legs of the turtle is kind of used as a rudder to be able to make it turn and change directions easily. But their flippers also help them when they're searching for food, and they can help them hold their prey. Yes, JC, you have a question?
The shell, sometimes if a great white shark or any kind of shark comes at a sea turtle, the sea turtle will like just fly, swim in circles around the shark sometimes, or just swim into a sea cave that they find while the shark is trying to find them. They will, sometimes they will slam themselves into the shark, like into the shark's mouth and the sharks will lose teeth sometimes because their
shell and their skin is really hard. Yep, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we talked about a little bit about what they eat. And so the different sea turtles, they all eat a little bit different things. So the green turtle, they are herbivores when they are little babies, when they're called hatchlings. They are omnivores. The adults, they're herbivores. So they eat, what is an herbivore? Does anybody remember from earlier? What does an herbivore eat?
Meat
Nope, grass.
and
Grasses, okay?
Oh, right.
Herbivores
Wait, what?
are, the omnivores eat both grasses and
Mhm.
every, you know, they eat everything. But the herbivores are more like vegetarians. They just eat the grasses and things of that sort. So when they're little babies, they're omnivores, but then they turn, when they get to be an adult, they turn into herbivores. So their diet is algae and seagrass and seaweed, and they have really fine teeth and on their beak, and it allows them to kind of scrape the algae off the rocks. And seaweed is kind of sticky and, you know, kind of that, so they can tear that seaweed apart. Now the leatherback is actually our largest sea turtle, and they are called gelatinivores, which in all honesty, we don't really have, you know, that's not typically, you know, it's usually herbivores and omnivores. But the gelatinivores, they eat gelatinous prey. And so those kind of things are jellyfish, things like that are squishy. They have soft bodies, could be octopus, soft bodies like sea squirts and such like that. They have two really sharp pointed cusps in their upper and one in the lower jaw, and that allows them to kind of pierce the soft jelly stuff. And that's the leatherback. The loggerhead is a carnivore, so it eats just meat. It eats crabs and conchs and whelks and horseshoe crabs. And when they're babies, they are omnivores, so they eat both plants and animals. But they have a really big head. That's why it's called the loggerhead. And they have strong jaws, which allows them to crush through the shells, because the crabs and lobsters and things like that, they have shells on them, so they have to be able to crush those. The hawksbill is referred to as spongivore because their diet is mostly of sponges. So they can eat 1,200 pounds of sponges in just 1 year. That's a lot of sponges if you think about, you know, what those are. And they are the ones who keep our coral reefs really healthy. So a lot of times you can, you know, because what they're eating, it gives a lot of space and sunlight for that to be able to reach our coral reefs. And so it keeps them, you know, blooming and having flowers and things like that. So remember we said like that hawksbill is sharp and narrow like a bird. That's why it's called the hawksbill. Because it has to be able to reach into the crevices where the reef, where the coral reefs are. The olive ridley sea turtle is omnivore, and they eat animals and plants like crabs, shrimp, lobsters, urchins, jellies, algae, and fish. The Kemp's ridley is also it's a carnivore. It eats crabs, fish, jellies, but its most popular food is the crab. And then the last one is the flatback, and it is an omnivore, but it eats a lot of sea cucumbers and the jellies, those soft corals, shrimps, crabs, mollusks, fish, and seaweed. Lena, you have a question? Can you unmute yourself, Lena? I can't.
How big is a sea turtle?
We're gonna talk. You're actually gonna see a video about that. They all are different sizes, and they can grow. They live to be they live a long time. So they could be like 60 years old. And the leatherback can be like I think it can be like 6 feet long. They are big. A lot of times they're large size, and they weigh a lot of sea turtles, but they get to be pretty big, some of them. So we're gonna talk about like what's in the name. We talked about the green sea turtle. And the green turtle shell is actually not, the green turtle shell is not even green. So we call it the green turtle, but it's not green. the sea turtle was actually named for the subdermal level, and it's a layer of fat under their skin, and it turns green because of their diet. The diet of seagrass and algae and all that is green, and so they eat, that's their main source of food. It actually turns their fat color green. So that's how it got the name of a green turtle. And a group of turtles, when they swim together, it's also known as a flotilla. And that is also what we call like a group of warships. You know, so if they're battleships and things, it's also called a flotilla. Another name that is often used for a group of sea turtles is a bale. So when they group together, it's a bale or a flotilla of sea turtles. And all of our turtles, they have a diverse habitat. So they can live in different areas, and they do survive in these areas. But it depends on oftentimes also what stage of life they might be in. So they could be on the beaches, and a female goes to the beaches to lay its eggs. And they go to the sandy beaches, and those eggs live there for about 2 months until they hatch. And once they hatch, they come out of the land and go back into the ocean. And we'll talk about that. Sometimes they live in the open sea. When they're young, they're juveniles, they grow up. So they never see their mom again. So the babies are hatched on the mama goes and lays all its eggs, and then the mama leaves, and then the baby grows up and it hatches, and then it goes into the ocean. So it has to fend for itself from the very first day that it hatches. So then it goes into the ocean, and it's a juvenile, and it grows in rafts of sargassum seaweed. And the leatherbacks, they generally live the most of their life in the open sea. They just swim, swim, swim. Sometimes they live in coastal waters like the loggerheads and the Kemp Ridleys and the green, where they're feeding on estuaries, and they're in those shallow areas of the coastal water, so they're eating a lot of the algae and the fish that are around there. And then sometimes they live in seagrass pastures. All of them except for the leatherback, because remember we said the leatherback, they don't eat seagrass, okay? So they don't need that seagrass to be able to live. But they are, they can live in the seagrass pastures. They can live near the reefs. You know, remember those that live off the reefs? And then sometimes they are in migrations, because what is a really cool, we're gonna learn about this, but what is really cool about a sea turtle is where it originally hatches, where it originally was born, it will go back there to lay its eggs. So no matter how far that they have traveled, they will go back to the very same beach that they were originally hatched at to be able to have their own eggs and babies. So now we're going to go over a little bit of the anatomy of the green sea turtle. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the Earth's geomagnetic field, but the sea turtle is covered in scales. And so that is on their head, their flippers. It's what makes their skin really tough for, like you said, the sharks and other things. They all have eyes, and they they can see their naturally nearsightedness. It helps when they're swimming under the water, because the water refracts the your sight. So they use that for their benefit. The males have a little claw on their flippers. So they have their front flippers and their back flippers. The males have a claw, and it makes them, it's what they use to hold on to the females when they actually are mating. The back of the shell those are called scutes, and they're bony plates that they make up all of the scutes make up the carpacci and the carapace. I'm sorry, carapace, and that is their back of their shell. The carapace is like the main part of their shell, which actually grows from their ribs, and then they have a tail. The bottom of the seashell is called the plastron, And so you have the plastron is the bottom, the top is the carapace, and all the things around it, all those little pieces are all called scutes. And so we're going to do this and see if you all can't remember. So everybody look at this model real quick. And we talked about why a green sea turtle that's not always green, remember?
Kendra, can I add something real quick?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So go back to the other slide.
Okay.
So the plastron that she's talking about, you can actually, if you look on the underneath of a turtle, that's how you can tell their gender. So if it is curved inward, that means it's a male, and if it's more rounded, it's a female. So if it's curved outward.
Thank you for that addition. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we are going to see if you all can't help me figure out what part is what. So go back to the annotate and see if you can't fill in these spots. And the words are right there. So the scutes, the carapace, the tail, the scales, the eye, the head, the beak, the back flipper, front flipper, and the plastron. I see some of you are drawing lines. That's okay too. Some of you can write, yeah. So yeah, the beak, the eye, the scutes, the back flipper, the tail. They all have tails. All right, I think you got a lot of them. We're gonna move on. I'm gonna clear these. And we'll go to the answers. All right. So here are our answers. So we have our eye. Oops. All right, let's clear that. Okay, so we have our eye, the head, the beak are all there located in the spot. We didn't talk about the little things that they have in there under their eyes about crying out the salt. And the carapace, and each of those little things are called scutes. The tail, the bottom of the plastron, the back flipper, and then our front flipper, and they are covered in scales. They're very good. All right. So we talked about this is after so they land on the turtles start on land, okay, because they're eggs and they have to be able to hatch. So the mama then what they do is they lay their eggs and they incubate for about 60 days, so about 2 months, and then they grow up as hatchlings and they crawl out of their nest and they go down the slope because the mama climbs pretty far into the land. Why do you think they climb far in the land? Anybody know? Why do you think they don't lay their eggs right close to the water's edge?
They want their babies to have the practice of going back up there and swimming.
Yeah, they want their babies to have some practice going back and learn how to swim, yeah. But what happens every day and every morning and every evening? If you've been to the beach, you see they have high tide and low tide and high tide and low tide. And if that happens, a lot of times the sand will wash away. So if the mama's nest is not far enough into the sand, the water might wash her babies out to sea and then they won't hatch. So they kind of climb further down into the beach or up on a hill if they can. And so when the babies hatch, they go down the slope, and what they use is the moon's reflection on the water to guide them. They have a sixth sense. They just know to follow the brightest light. And that's become an issue with a lot of beach resorts and hotels where places are asking them to turn their lights out at night, because when the babies hatch, they go towards the brightest light, and that should be the moon. And so if they get confused and they go towards the hotels and the street lights and things that are the brightest light, it could get them run over. It can actually get them confused, and they go towards the hotel instead of going towards their moon. So they use the moon to help guide them with their reflection. And some of the eggs in the nest, they all hatch within a couple of days of each other. And then the babies have to dig their way out of the sand. And by having a lot of them, that hatch around the same time, it increases their odds of making it to the water. Because once they hatch, a lot of times they still have some more, but this is the most vulnerable time, and they still get caught up by sometimes birds eating them, or crabs, or other things that eat the turtles. And so that the hatchlings, they head out to sea, where they will then live about 5 to 7 years. And like I said, they have to learn to live on their own from day one. And they float around and they eat and eat and eat. And then once they become they're juveniles, the turtles then make its next move, and then they ride the currents. And they ride the currents across the ocean to a new home, and they get their different habitat, and they forage for food. And then once they get to be sexual maturity age, the female turtles, they mate, and then they start their journey back to where they hatched. So once they have mated with a male turtle, they go back and they start swimming back to the beach where they were hatched. And the mother climbs up in the dark. So they do this by the darkness. They only climb up at night. And then they dig a hole where she then lays about 100 eggs, or even more. And then she buries them in the sand, and like a blanket, she covers them all up. And then she returns back to the sea, and she never sees her babies. And they may nest and lay eggs several times in a single season, but then they won't return back to the nest for about 3 to 7 years. And then, but they all return always back to their home place, because they have this phenomenon that's called natal homing. And they don't really know exactly how. It's kind of somewhat mysterious. Scientists, they actually believe that they have these genetic markers that they can read the Earth's magnetic field, and they have their own like geo tracking, where they like their own GPS right there in their head, where they can then tell where they hatched, and they can, because they have been swimming for years and years, and they swim back to the original place where they were born, and they return. All right, so do I have questions? I see something bleeping at me. Is that in the
Nope, you're
chat?
good.
Okay. All right, let me go to the next slide. So that's what I was talking about, this geomagnetic compass, like their own GPS, where they have this sense where the Earth magnetic field, and they can navigate for that natal beach to lay their eggs. And so They also, we were talking about, they sometimes have their diets that change, where when they're a baby, they might eat both animals and grasses. And then when they get to be adults, where they just switch into just eating grasses. And they turn that fat under their carapace, and that's what turns them green, which gives those turtles the name green turtle. All right. So when sea turtles are, when the sea turtles are eggs and they're still in the nest, that is actually when they're the most vulnerable part of their stage of their life. Because also dogs sometimes will dig them up. Raccoons will eat them at night. Birds, crabs, even ants, they all like to eat the sea turtle. And so protecting the nest have aided with some of like recovery and helping the sea turtle population. JC Elena, yes.
Those are baby leatherbacks.
The baby leatherbacks, they sure are. Yep. And then also rising temperature and unpredictable conditions affect the sea turtle's habitat and the food availability. And then also some threats are the loss of nesting beaches because of development. More hotels and resorts and places are being built up on the ocean beaches, and that means more people. And also some folks even do egg harvesting, and then you've got pollution that's on the beaches. So all of those could be additional threats. The ocean's water, the sea level rising, the sea turtles even not having enough food, and that, with them dying, and not having enough mates or nesting beaches to go to, and the warmer weather, those warmer oceans oftentimes means more intense storms. So that means also more beach erosion, and their nests could be flooded. Remember, they have to go pretty deep into the ocean, into the sand to lay those nests. If they don't, their nests could wash away, and then all of their 100 baby eggs could be, washed away into the ocean, and then they wouldn't be able to hatch. But like a lot of other reptiles, when sea turtles lay their eggs, the babies that are inside are not predetermined whether they're male or female. Just like when you're born, whether you're born a boy or a girl. When they are, when the eggs are hatched, it depends on the temperature of the nest that determines what sex the hatchlings are going to be. So the warmer temperatures are female. The cooler temperatures result in male. And the temperatures have been climbing, which means there's been a lot more female nests, so a lot more female sea turtles that are being born more than boys. And so that makes it a little more difficult to be able to find a mate once they get to be old enough to have to mate. So it can be a little tricky. So with the warming temperature, it oftentimes will affect just the sex of the hatchlings. So some other threats could be trapping sea turtles, whether it's accidental or on purpose, because they make sea turtle soup. Illegal and unregulated harvest of sea turtles and their eggs continue to threaten the green turtle populations. They get caught because they mistakenly are caught with commercial fishing, and sometimes they get caught in netting and such like that. But since sea turtles spend most of their lives at sea and sometimes on the on the shore to nest, they get caught by nets that are meant for other animals. And a turtle trap and a net or hooked on a line, it can't surface. And a turtle is still a reptile, so it needs to breathe. It does not have gills. It can hold its breath a really long time, sometimes 4 to 7 hours, but it still needs to be able to breathe. So if it can't get up, it eventually drowns. And so to help with this problem, there's a new invention it's been around for a while. It's called a TED. It's a turtle excluder device. So fishing industries have created this where it's like a trap door that opens up. So when they're fishing for shrimp or other, animals, and if that turtle is also fishing for shrimp to eat, it has a trap door to be able to get out. And so there's there's some videos and things to learn more about TEDS, the turtle excluder device. And when you buy your seafood, you want to make sure that it's a turtle, comes from a turtle friendly company that is turtle friendly gear. So this was the other thing I wanted to mention about all sea turtles. And JC had mentioned about this earlier. All of our sea turtles are conservation concerns. So all geographic groups of sea turtles are listed in either the vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered species under the Endangered Species Act. Some populations are actually doing better than others. Like, for example, Hawaii and Costa Rica, their sea turtles numbers have gone up. So they've been a rise for decades, thanks to the conservation work that they've done. But still, no sea turtle population has improved enough to remove it from the list of endangered species. So most of the sea turtles populations are still in decline. Like in South and West the Pacific, the population faces a lot of threats and they're endangered primarily because of the climate change, fishing, and egg harvesting, nest destruction, and other human activities. So you all see the 7 types. We got the leatherbacks, which are vulnerable. The Kemp's Ridley is critically endangered. The olive Ridley is vulnerable. Hawksbill is critically endangered. Green is endangered. The loggerhead is vulnerable, and the flatback, they can't even find enough evidence to figure out where they are. So they don't even have enough evidence to be able to classify those. So why are sea turtles important? Why are we even learning about this? What do we care about our sea turtles? And the turtles, they are like our, they help keep our oceans healthy. It's a healthy habitat because basically they act like a gardener. Like they mow the grass. They are mowing the lawn, keeping our lawn full of green. The sea turtles, they graze, keep the seagrasses beds healthy. They trim the ends off the seagrasses, which then stimulates new growth, which not only helps the sea turtles, it also helps the fish and the rest of the ocean that lives on those as well. And on the beach, those unhatched sea turtle eggs, they act as fertilizers for our plants to keep our beaches healthy. They can stabilize our beach dunes, which then helps with the erosion. And because those eggs and the shells are rich in marine nutrients. So it uses compost of sand, or even if they are eaten by predators, it helps the plants and the animals that live there at the ocean, at the ocean's edge. So have any of you all been to the beach and ever seen this? Anybody ever seen this before at the ocean? You can raise your hand. Yep.
Yep.
Well, we've seen that. Great.
Are
Those
those
are,
boys?
you have not, Devesh. Okay, so those are actually tracks from the flippers of a
Yeah,
sea
there's a sea turtle.
Those are sea turtle tracks, and there are volunteers who walk every morning at beaches when they're like, if they know that's a sea turtle beach, and they can walk in the morning. They do these walks early mornings to be able to look for these sea tracks because, like we said, the sea turtle comes at night to lay its eggs. They follow the tracks to where they see it ends, and then they put this up. And this is they stake it out where they have now discovered, this is right here, is the the nest of the sea turtle. So then they mark it and label it so that they make sure nobody then puts their beach chairs or their beach umbrella over top of it. And so it is protected and staked off so that nobody will then disturb this area of sand, so that those hatchlings have a chance to be able to grow and hatch and come back into the ocean as sea turtles. All right. So Can anybody, you can write again in the chat, or you can write on this. Anybody remembers any of the threats that we have to the sea turtles? Any of the threats that you remember that I went over to the sea turtles? And you use the annotate. Remember the annotate.
We have us as humans in the plastic in the
Yep.
chat.
All right, JC, Lena.
Plastic humans. Plastic humans. Plastic humans.
Yeah.
Nets.
Next,
Great white sharks.
great white sharks.
uh,
Devesh, you had
Crabs.
something.
Oh, lights at the beach.
Lights at the
Clearing,
beach.
temperature, lights. Yep. Lights at the beach. Pollution. Yep.
The seagulls.
I'll be back in a
Seagulls, crabs. Yep.
Snakes. No.
Snakes don't live at the beach.
Not so much snakes, I would say.
I know.
Predators. Yep. Raccoons, dogs. Things that dig.
Mammals. Let's just say mammals. Stop.
All
Sorry.
right, those are very good. You named quite a few of them. So I'm going to clear those. You named quite a few, and we'll go to this slide to show you. So we had climate change, the nests being disturbed. It could be marine debris, like plastic straws and plastic bags. Sea turtles, that looks like a jellyfish to them. If you see a plastic bag and it's moving in the water, it kind of looks like a jellyfish to a sea turtle. Remember, they're nearsighted, and that helps them because they can use that to their advantage, but sometimes it's a disadvantage as well. They could get caught in some netting and other pollution. Pollution, oil spills, being caught in or entangled in fishing gear or nets, illegal poaching, like I said, making sea turtle soup, getting hit by a rotor of a boat. We didn't talk about that one. When they come up for air and they get run over by a boat and get clipped by the propeller. Dogs, and then that light pollution. Remember, they go for the biggest, brightest light, which should be the moon, in the sky, and that's what tells them where to go when they hatch. They follow the moon because that moon gets reflected off the ocean. But if the brightest light is the street light or the hotels, they go towards the brightest light. So that light pollution sometimes misleads them. So plastic can actually clog the digestive system. It can make them choke. It can also make them too buoyant, so they can't dive for their food. Plastic a lot of times floats, and so they can't, when they if they eat a lot of plastic, they can actually become too buoyant. And like we said earlier, the clear plastic bags is one of their favorite foods, and it looks like a jellyfish. All right, so we're going to answer this question. Do you know, can sea turtles live in fresh water?
Yes.
How many of you all think yes? Devesh, I saw you say
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think so.
Actually, no. Sea turtles and
That's
freshwater
like-
turtles are very different. Remember, freshwater turtles, they have feet. Sea turtles, they have flippers. And they have very difficult physical characteristics. So they have to live in the salty water. So they adapt to their unique environment. Remember those tear ducts that they have? That they drink the water, the seawater, and they cry out the salt. So life at sea and life in freshwater are totally different. So a sea turtle cannot live in fresh water. Can sea turtles live on land?
No, they'll be too slow.
That's right. No, they can
And they
go
like
on
the
land, but they cannot live on land. They come ashore, they lay their eggs, and then they go back to the ocean. So they go back to the sea because they have to, that's where their food is. The food that they eat is in the ocean. So they wouldn't be able to live without the food. Okay, so the answer is no. Can sea turtles breathe underwater?
No.
No? That's correct. They sure can't. The sea turtle, it can't breathe underwater. It doesn't have gills. It has lungs. And so they have to surface to be able to breathe their air. They can hold their breath a long time. They're really talented breather. They can hold their breath from 4 to 7 hours if they're on a really long dive. If they're chasing after something that they want to eat, like depending on what they are, like a loggerhead and those type of things. And what is the biggest type of sea turtle? Anybody know?
Me.
What is it?
Leatherback.
The leatherback. Very good. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and share this screen instead. Where'd it go? There it is. Can you see this?
See what?
Nope.
No,
Okay,
we do
so
not.
Hold on. I got to go back. Okay. There it is. Okay, now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, we're gonna watch this.
Sea
in 3
turtles
minutes.
are ancient mariners. Present in all but Earth's coldest oceans, these marine reptiles are well adapted to a life on the move. Sea turtles have existed since the time of the dinosaurs. The earliest known marine turtle lived about 120 million years ago. Named Desmatoculus paddlei, it was 6 feet long and had the characteristic features of modern sea turtles, including a carapace or top shell and paddle-like limbs. Today, there are 7 species of sea turtles, with the largest being the leatherback. Growing as long as 8 feet and weighing up to 2,000 pounds, it is larger than known fossils of its prehistoric ancestor, D. paddlei. Sea turtles can lay more than 150 eggs at a time. Called a clutch, these large egg deposits help ensure the survival of sea turtle hatchlings. Once a female lays her eggs, she returns to the sea, leaving her hatchlings to fend for themselves. Fewer than 0.1% of hatchlings survive to adulthood, in part due to numerous predators on the beach. Emerging in large numbers increases the chance that some will survive. A sea turtle's sex is determined by temperature. Unlike most vertebrates, a sea turtle's sex is not determined by sex chromosomes. Instead, the temperature of the nest determines the sex of the hatchlings. When temperatures are warm, at about 88 degrees Fahrenheit, most of the hatchlings will be female. But when temperatures are cooler, less than around 82 degrees Fahrenheit, most of the hatchlings will be male. Sea turtles use Earth's magnetic fields to navigate. Sea turtles have geomagnetic abilities, which serve as an internal GPS. The turtles have particles of magnetite, a magnetic mineral, in their brains. The magnetite likely plays a role in orienting sea turtles to Earth's magnetic poles, similar to a compass. Baby sea turtles imprint on the unique magnetic signature of the beaches where they hatch. This magnetic map can guide them back to the same beaches several years later to lay their own eggs. All 7 sea turtle species are threatened with extinction. Once abundant, sea turtle populations have dramatically declined in the past 2 centuries. Fishing is a major threat to sea turtles as they become caught in fishing nets as bycatch or accidental catch. illegal harvesting of turtle eggs, trafficking in turtle products, and ocean pollution are also concerns. However, policies have been enacted to reduce bycatch, protect turtle habitats, and prohibit the killing of sea turtles and their eggs. By continuing this kind of intervention, humans can help stop the decline of sea turtles, helping keep these ancient mariners in the world's oceans.
I'm trying to get back to the screen. Stop share. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that was a good summary to be able to summarize what we were talking about and all the different areas that we went over. And our next
Spices! Yeah!
Yes. So we are going to be, that is going to be, oops, that was that. Oops. Yes. So our next presentation next week is going to be on spices. So it's going to be a spicy time. So be sure to join us. Does anybody have any questions about sea turtles?
I learned a
Anybody
lot.
have
I
a
didn't know all
question?
of that about sea turtles.
Awesome. So we are going to stop live streaming and stop recording and